Okay, so again, my name is Dora Clancy from Creative Europe Desk Ireland. Also, here is Aisling, Jules, and Leona from our team. And then I'm going to pass you over to Nadine Constant, who is going to introduce the session.
Thank you, Orla, and good morning to everyone. Nice to see that so many people are here today. First, I would like to thank the Irish Desk for co-organizing this with us. This helps us greatly to share the great news of the launch of the Media Carbon Calculator. So the journey started in 2021 with a stakeholders dialogue that led to a statement in February 2022. So it's been a couple of years. And this journey was then decided to develop a tool to measure carbon emissions and to try to make the audiovisual industry greener as a part of the European Green Deal. And on the team, we've had Florian Rehman and his team from Yamdu developing the tool with us. And we can now finally say that we have launched the tool and we're ready and excited to share it with you. And I would just like to add that the tool is free and it's not a tool that's made to compete with existing tools. It's an addition and it's supposed to cater for all the EU 27 countries. So let's go to the exciting part and hear Florian introduce the tool to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you for organizing this to the Irish Desk. And of course, thank you everybody for interrupting your busy production day and take an hour to talk about sustainability. I will share my screen and I hope you see the slides now. If not, then please, Nadine, let me know. Otherwise, here we go. So, first of all, what is today about? So I will give you like a high-level introduction why greening audiovisual productions actually matters. If this is a bit redundant to a couple of experts that might be already be in the meeting here, forgive me. But of course, we also want that everybody is here on the same page. Then the major part of today's presentation will be, of course, like a deep dive into the Media Carbon Calculator and how it works. Then I was also asked to show how the API, so the interface, just the calculation part of the Media Carbon Calculator can be used in other products like other workflows and other national calculators, for example. And then we will talk about how to set up an account and have still 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So who's this guy? I'm Florian. I used to be a film producer many years ago, then kind of switched to software web applications. As Nadine said, yes, we are the company behind Yamdu. That's a project management tool like for, script imports, script breakdown, shooting schedules, budgets, call sheets, stuff like this. And of course, we are responsible here for the Media Carbon Calculator. By the way, I'm also a member of the Hollywood Professional Association, Movie Labs Industry Forum, and Trusted Partner Network. And in all those associations, we kind of talk day in and day and night, like for like how to make production workflows more efficient, move them to the cloud, and of course also make them more sustainable. Now, when it comes to me on a private level, I guess you just need to know two things. I love good food and I love great movies. And especially if you think about food, like the more complex a dish looks like, the harder it is kind of to tell what ingredients are actually in there, right? And that's exactly the same with movies. So the more complex a production gets, it's not only harder to kind of guess the budget and break it down into it kind of millions of parts, but also to of course, break it down into its carbon footprint. And that's what we're talking about today. So really how to kind of measure carbon emissions on audiovisual productions and how the Media Carbon Calculator can help you along the way. So as a little background, what we're talking about when it comes to carbon emissions, well, you might know they're measured in metric tons. And then Sam Reed, like the CEO or manager of the Sustainable Entertainment Alliance, a friend of ours, was asked in the Times magazine last year, you might know this article, well, how much what is this, right? What is a film production in metric tons of carbon emissions? Well, they say For a small indie movie, you're probably like in the area of the hundreds of metric tons. Of course, for a Hollywood production, it's definitely in the thousands of metric tons. And they say, well, this is comparable, for example, to 600 to 700 US households per year and their equivalent on carbon emissions. This is a bit tricky to compare, to be honest, because we don't know where are those households and what is kind of the power grid. And in Europe or in Ireland, is this maybe 1,000 households per year? But you kind of get the idea, right? And then, of course, there are larger shows, large international co-productions, serialized productions that might be emit even more like carbon over the course of their production. In European productions, we're probably more kind of in this area on the left side in hundreds of metric tons. And of course, it heavily depends on your type. Is it just a documentary? Is it already a serialized production, et cetera, et cetera? And we also see, of course, already in our beta testing that there are also like domestic productions that can also get into the thousands of metric tons, or of course, also in the topic of international co-productions. So what is the result? Well, there is a study by the Max Planck Institute that you might know that they say for about a metric ton of CO2e, this results in, unfortunately, 3 square meters of Arctic ice melting down forever. So in our example here, you could say that, like for a Hollywood movie, like one soccer stadium is gone forever. Now, you might say, well, this is Hollywood and we're in Ireland and, I do my small indie production, but, it matters if you think about the sum of it all, right? If you look on IMDb and the hundreds of thousands of productions, yes, it can be shorts or whatever, but it's just a lot of content that is being produced. And that's why the European Commission said, well, we need to include all verticals, all industries when it comes to the Green Deal, also the film industry, or let's say the audiovisual industry. Now, as a little background, I guess a lot of you also know this part that, of course, there is a very common base and reporting base, the greenhouse gas GHG protocol, and the Sustainable Entertainment Alliance, like 2 years ago, I think, recommended how to break down those categories and scopes for the audiovisual industry. Of course, there is always like scope 1, scope 2, like, the direct or kind of indirect emissions of, for example, network, a broadcaster, like the corporation itself. But there's also like the scope 3 level, either in upstream activities or also downstream activities. Let's not talk about scope 3 downstream. Let's focus on scope 3 upstream. And that's probably where you as an indie producer are located, right? And there we have the categories by the GHG protocol. We don't use leased assets or capital goods, but a lot of other categories, of course, do matter, like, travel and waste and energy and stuff like this. And by producing and then delivering a film to the broadcaster network, for example, it automatically becomes their scope 3, and hence, especially in the future, if CSRD it becomes like a more a thing. Let's see, it got a bit delayed, unfortunately, but let's say if there are more and more directives and reporting standards, that of course you will be more and more asked to also provide a carbon emission report then, for example, to your financing partner network. And we think the media carbon calculator is a great starting point to actually do this and hopefully use it next year in your productions. As a background, like in the original scope of the tender, there have already been categories based on what we've just seen in the GHG protocol, but kind of, transferred into the world of film production. And it was identified that there should be a strong focus on the following categories, as you can see them here, especially travel, energy. If travel is higher than energy or the other way around, of course, heavily depends on your production, but usually those are major driving forces of carbon emissions in our industry, also departments catering logistic waste. And as a first phase of the media carbon calculator, we decided like to focus on those categories and the activities as we will see them in the next slide. So it was then, of course, also the idea to not only provide like European-wide factors as one average standard. We do this for some factors, but also to have some factors and data sets that are then very specific to the European Union. And of course, that means also like Irish factors, as we will see in a second. Also, everything should be in this first phase consumption based and with easy to understand metrics and units. This led to several data sets, actually two big, large data sets that have been created by our partner Klimaktiv. Klimaktiv is a German company specialized in environmental and carbon measuring. They're also the company behind the official calculators in Germany, Green Shooting, Austria, Northern Italy, and Switzerland. And here they provided two tables. The first one here is kind of for the conventional emission factors. I don't really like the term. Let's rather say non-renewable, non-sustainable, fossil-based options, like for example, diesel, right? And there you can see that we don't distinguish if a liter of diesel is being burned in Ireland or in Germany or in Greece. We say that's kind of always the same emissions, but there are national factors. For example, hotel overnight stays, catering, and things like this. And then there's a second table, the more green, renewable, sustainable alternatives. And there, of course, we have things like vegetarian catering, train rides, and stuff like this. And we'll see this in action in a second in the Media Carbon Calculator. So let's dive right into, and I will share my screen now in the browser to go to the Media Carbon Calculator. We will share the link later during the Q&A session, how you can access the Media Carbon Calculator and actually register here for an EU login. If you already have an EU login, for example, if you already have been accessing like EU funding portals, etc. in the past, you might already have one. It's exactly the same EU login. And it's free of charge. If you don't have one, you will get to the registration page, takes about a minute. In this case, I have an EU login and directly like guided into the Media Carbon Calculator. Now I'm logged in. So first of all, before we go down here to all my projects, there are the user settings up here. So those are kind of tied, of course, to your EU login account. But the Media Carbon Calculator asks for a couple of additional things. It's important here to say this is all for statistical purposes and it will only be used in the background in an anonymized way, right? So it's, of course, all your data, your private data is protected, but we will see like on a personal level, but also now on a project level that we need some data to distinguish, of course, projects. Then you see like an overview of all your projects. As you see, I have a lot of them with all the previous sessions here. So we want to create even another one, a new one. And this is kind of, I don't know, it's like the Irish dream. And then we have a production company. This could be Dublin Films International. And then you see country of origin. So this could be, in our case, of course, Ireland. So an European state, but the production company, also the user, by the way, can kind of be anywhere on this planet. It doesn't really matter. This like come down later to the factors, and there it matters, of course, where you produce. And then there's something called project status, and this could be actual or estimate. I will choose actual here. The background is that, as you know, in some member states, there are already kind of carbon emission calculation systems in place for national funding, and you might be asked to already provide a CO2e budget before you even start producing, right? Just for the application of funding to get money, similar as a kind of money budget estimate, and then later they need to actualize this. In this case, I will choose actualization or an actual budget right away. The PIC number is a number for your company within the European Commission's world of web applications. If you already have this, enter it. If you don't know what this is, not so important. What is important is the primary production country, principal photography. Now, this is very important for the calculations. And here, let's say we actually shoot in Ireland. And then we need things like the project type. This, again, does not matter for the calculations per se. but it's very important in the background for the statistical purposes. Some of you might know that the European Audiovisual Observatory actually tried to come up with a study, I think 2 or 3 years ago, to like say something about carbon emissions in the audiovisual industry across Europe. And they saw it's very, very hard to find data. And actually, they couldn't really do a study. So all of this is kind of harmonized with the questionnaires of, for example, the observatory and the commission. And it's just needed to distinguish projects, but again, in an anonymized way, right? For statistical purposes, we do not share like your project name or your production company's name. We just need to, of course, there should be a difference if I shoot like a 10 episode Netflix thing in Ireland versus a small documentary in Greece, etc., etc. So we need some things to later benchmark like all those activities. Then was a sustainability manager on board, yes or no? Year of production. The year of production, again, does matter for the calculations because the great thing is about the media carbon calculator, it's not only free of charge, it will actually be updated on an annual level by our partner Klimaktiv. So they take a look in, for example, local environmental authorities or university studies or whatever to see if something has changed, for example, in the mix of the national power grid and stuff like this. And then they will update those factors on an annual basis. And all the rest, again, is just for statistical purposes. Now, we do have created our project, Irish Dream, and we just go in here and we see the summary page. And so far, yeah, well, no surprise. This is great because this is like zero emissions, but of course, we have not yet entered anything. So I will come back to the summary page and reports in a minute. Let's first see how we can actually enter information. So here are the tabs to the right, like for example, energy. And yeah, well, of course, they are similar as on the slides as what we've seen before, kind of also those GHG categories. And for energy, for example, I have subtabs for studios, locations, post facilities, production offices. And then for studios here, I can simply start entering activities, as we call it. And I could, for example, go by a set, right? So here we shoot several scenes in like what we call the King's Hall. And then this is maybe, I don't know, it's the Cork Studio A, whatever the location might be, and we're shooting. And then you have a choice of the national mix electricity, or if you know that this is certified like green, like it's only supplied with green electricity. Let's here use the national mix, and then let's, I don't know, just randomly, let's say 4,000 kilowatt hours of energy. So again, everything here in the media carbon calculator is consumption based. And this already gives me a result. As you can see here, the CO2e spend or emissions in CO2e in kilograms. And then you could also add heating. So maybe it's already cold and we need to burn, unfortunately, 200 liters of, for example, heating oil, and it just adds up to the studio. And you can ask the studio, of course, for such information. And maybe let's say there is another scene or like set that we need to build, and that's maybe Studio B in wherever, right? And there we have to say, well, they have actually green electricity. It's a different location. And coincidentally, we also have 4,000 kilowatt hours. And that, of course, is already a lot less because it's the more renewable, sustainable alternative. And then also, for example, for heating, let's say maybe we can heat with biogas. And I don't know if it's 200 kilowatt hours, not directly comparable, but just like for the sake here, of course, we now have a more green alternative for our second studio. And then you can just go on punching in the data in whatever granularity you prefer. Everything is added up, as you can see here, into a subtotal for this specific category. And you see when it was last edited. You can also search for activities if your tables and overviews get quite long for KI, Kings, filtering it. You can also bulk edit, and you can also just, for example, choose one and delete this particular activity. So that's just how to manage and edit those tables, and it's exactly the same across the media carbon calculator and all other categories. Now let's move to those other categories, and probably in your productions, travel will play an important role. And here we have things like accommodation. So accommodation could mean, well, we have like a famous actress, let's say like Meryl Streep, and she has, to stay obviously in a hotel, right? But maybe not in during shooting. But maybe not in any hotel, in a luxury hotel. And maybe she has, I don't know, 42 overnight stays. So again, you see like the unit here, quite easy to get, like from your like invoices or your travel coordinator and booking confirmations, like the overnight stays. But here for a luxury hotel, and that again gives you like the CO2e in kilograms. And again, this is based on Irish factors. It would be different, for example, in Greece or Croatia. You can also enter notes, by the way. So you could say this needs to be a five-star hotel as per contract, right? With Merrill, we have no choice. But maybe with our light and grip crew, so let's say light and grip, we don't, punch in all the individual overnight stays. We just say they've all been staying at the same hotel. Maybe in this case, it's a regular hotel, and it was, I don't know, 1,000 overnight stays, just, to have something in here. So you can also accumulate all that data if you want. But you could also say we have, I don't know, Mick, our gaffer, and he's actually staying in his own apartment or in an apartment we rent, I don't know, for 30 nights. And this has like downtown Dublin, maybe small studio, 25 square meters. And of course, like an apartment is always a very sustainable alternatives to the regular hotels. So those are things how you can manage hotel and accommodations in like the granularity you prefer. Same goes for the transportation parts over here, like the flights, for example. So obviously, Merrill needs to come from LAX to Dublin Airport. And we say, okay, that's, I don't know, maybe it's 7,000 kilometers. I'm not sure. But just, we enter this. So this is all passenger and distance based. So if you have a flight where a couple of people are on, you always need to multiply this to get like the total distance flown. The media carbon calculator, other than, I don't know, the green shooting calculator, EcoProt, Green Producers Club or whatever, or Albert does not like distinguish like with too many like details here. It's just very easy go by distance and persons. And in this case, it gives you the CO2e result. Then the same, of course, for train rides. So this has been a huge challenge for Klimaktiv already to kind of find the national factors for train rides, because the train grids and kind of the equivalent in CO2e, that's really something that is quite different across all the European states. In this case, it's again all total distance based, like the passenger kilometers. And you could say this is like for my entire production crew in week one, for example, right? And then you combine all the kilometers. Again, all distance based, consumption based, and it gives you like here the result. And it's no surprise that this, of course, is way more sustainable than flying if it's possible. And then we have fuel types. You could also punch in individual like receipts from gas stations, but of course that could be a lot of work. So you could also say, well, those are my production cars in shooting week one, right? And let's say we combine everything that is gas driven, and then we have already gas here, and let's say that's 1,200 liters of gas. And then I could say, well, I also had a generator, right? And unfortunately, that generator was diesel driven. And maybe coincidentally, it's also 1,200 liters. And you already see like diesel is probably the worst choice. But I also have a couple of production cars week one, and maybe let's choose CNG, right? Compressed natural gas. So you see here, we have a lot of options, also CNG, but there are a lot of alternatives down here. For CNG, again, it changes the units. So let's say it's also 1,200 kilograms. You cannot compare this one-to-one with liters, but it's already a bit better than, for example, gas-driven cars. And maybe you ask your local rental house if they have also alternatives like, I don't know, HVO 100, It is based on vegetable oil. And then again, you see also from a generator, this goes down a lot, right? So there are a lot of options here for fuels. Not everything might be available in all European countries, but the media carbon calculator is prepared for also more modern and smarter, more sustainable fuel types. And then we come to my favorite part, as you can imagine, catering. So for catering, we could say, well, this is the onset catering for week number one. And maybe we want to say, well, this is mixed diet, right? There is meat in this diet. So we use like conventional omnivore. And we say the caterer says, well, those are 800 meals served in total for our cast and crew. But we also have, I don't know, for onset catering week one, we also have some vegans, right, or vegetarians. So there are also two other options, vegetarians, vegans. And then we can say maybe it was also 120 vegan dishes, which obviously, of course, is a lot less. So, asking your crew for like a veggie day once or twice a week is always a great idea. And of course, catering suppliers should be able to handle all this. So there you can easily compare what it means when it comes to on-set catering. Again, this is just like an overall meal in case a crew member, production worker, cast member is participating in on-set catering, and it does not distinguish with various types and breakfast only and all that stuff as maybe other calculators do. It's just a very simple way based on meals served. And then last but not least, we come to the departments. There are, of course, many, many things that could be part of the departments. We had to focus first on set construction and the related materials as just being usually the big drivers when it comes to this section. And let's say we have, like in our studio in Dublin, we are building this King's Hall set, right? And then we have several types of materials like medium density fiberboard, PVC flooring, chipboard, a lot of stuff like this. Let's just stick with MDF board. Then you should know the thickness maybe. So just ask the production design or set construction team, and then they will maybe tell you that we needed like 650 square meters, for example, right? Or maybe for the same set, we also needed to paint it. So we have wall paint, and then it changes, as you can see, to liters. And maybe we needed 200 liters of a certain wall paint. So this is just also a way how to add the departmental area. And in this case, of course, for the materials. So we have entered information, so we can go back to the summary and report tab. And you see we already have a total of almost 28 kilograms of carbon, 28 metric tons of carbon emissions. And the media carbon calculator in its summary tab has like an awareness creation in here. What do I mean? Because it shows you first the non-renewable, non-sustainable options that you've entered, and then versus the, let's say, like renewable areas. And that's kind of where you have then those subtotals of all the categories that we've seen before. And it's one of the intentions of the project to also show production companies and filmmakers to simply maybe ask or think about more sustainable alternatives when it comes to all those production information. Now, apart from like seeing, of course, the summary in here, you could also run exports. You can either do a PDF export. So the PDF export will actually create the official uh, European Commission's export with all the information, the basic information, and then also like the total of this summary. But you can also export to Excel. In this case, it's not only the summary tab. So let's just open this. It's not only the summary tab, it also shows you all the data that we've entered in those categories, like here our Cork studio or travel accommodation, including like this little note for Merrill Suites, overnight stay in a luxury hotel, and things like this. So you can always go to Excel and then maybe further process all that data or handle it in there. And then for the project details, you can always go back to this tab and actually change the project details if something needs to be updated. But you could potentially also say, well, I wanna change the primary production country, right? I don't know, for whatever reason, I want to change it to Greece. So this is also like you can create as many scenarios and budgets as you like, but then in this case, all the entire calculations on a national basis will be updated, and you can already see there's a slight difference. You can always click on the European Commission's icon to go back to your overview of all the projects. As I mentioned before, you can create as many projects and scenarios as you like. Here in the context menu, you can also duplicate projects, delete them, or change, of course, the status. And here's also where you can find the email, how to reach out to us if you have any suggestions, for example, and feedback. So this is the Media Carbon Calculator as a standalone product. I will share the link later in the chat. But this is not the only way to use the Media Carbon Calculator. Part of the project and the original tender was also to provide the calculation part of the Media Carbon Calculator via an API, an interface that can be used in other applications. That could be other existing national calculators or production applications, etc. And I was asked to show you like one example in our own application called Yamdu. So this is not a Yamdu show, no worries, but so far it's the only other application that is using the Media Carbon Calculator API. And if you're interested in that, of course, always reach out to us. So it means, just as a quick background, in Yamdu, you do not think about sustainability from day one, right? You just invite your crew and do all the onboarding, and you import your script and have AI tagging or do your own breakdowns by departments. And there's a, partnership with Final Draft when it comes to revisions. And there is the shooting schedule. You do it in Yamdu, or you get it from Movie Magic scheduling and stuff like this. So it's basically a production management tool. But sustainability managers told us, well, there are a lot of things that actually matter then later for tools like the Media Carbon Calculator. For example, I could get like the narrative sets from my script. And obviously, I do have then filming locations in the real world, like, Rector's Palace in Dubrovnik, and there's the address and, who's the content person and date of days and stuff like this. But also information could be entered like is it a filming location? Is it like non-renewable energy, the consumption, kilowatt hours, the heating type, the area information, stuff like this. So this is already information from location that can be collected like during pre-production time. And very similar, for example, here is a travel tool integrated. That's kind of not for sustainability managers, right? That's for travel coordinators in the production to use Yamdu, for example, to create itineraries here for the actor Hector Carrasco, also for crew members. And he needs to fly from Los Angeles to JFK Airport, and then he's staying in the Peninsula Hotel. And you see again, like it automatically calculates, for example, the distances in kilometers or miles, or it automatically tells you this is a luxury hotel and it has so and so many overnight stays and where the hotel is located and stuff like this. So there can potentially be a lot of information that is simply created on the fly that later matters for a tool like the Media Carbon Calculator. So we added here like a sustainability area, and you can also create actual and estimates like for your carbon budgets. But here for all the countries you might be, for example, producing in an international co-production. You see here it has like 28 something metric tons, but you can also filter to just the German part, and it goes down to 70.5 metric tons and the different areas, and you can compare it with other scenarios, etc., etc. So you can always kind of show me your entire carbon budget or just like a particular part. And that's where it's interesting to use the Media Carbon Calculator. I can go to Energy Studios locations, so it's kind of very similar categories, and I have an international calculator profile activated. So I have like the official German profile, the green shooting by Klimaktiv, the IDM, Austrian, Swiss. We also have a license for the pair calculator, the American system, and of course the Media Carbon Calculator. So if I import, for example, locations, right? So from my location area, I don't punch them in manually. I rather say, well, retrieve all this information from the location management part. And as Yamdu knows, the address, for example, that we have the Rector's Palace or Sponsor Palace being located in Dubrovnik, meaning in Croatia, it automatically allocates those emissions with the media carbon calculator to the specific factors, in this case, for Croatia. And then you also see, of course, the source behind it and the carbon emissions. And that's, for example, exactly the same for the accommodation, and I can simply, import all my overnight stays across my production. And again, it will, of course, use the media carbon calculator factors for everything that is part of the EU27 member states. Here, of course, it's the pair calculator for hotels in the US, the green shooting German profile for example, hotels in Germany. But down here, you can see again, for example, in Zagreb, Dubrovnik, or here also in Portugal. That's also from our previous demos. It always takes the specific calculators of a nation, and then you can compare this again in your summary tab. So this is a great way to also use the media carbon calculator in existing systems. And again, it will share information in an anonymized way with the European Commission. And we hope over the years to come, we finally can have, some benchmarking and some data on green production in the European Union. All right. So last but not least, this is the data that I will be sharing in a second in the chat. You will get the link for the media carbon calculator to just try it. Again, it's free of charge. Again, the email address if you want to provide us with feedback, with ideas. Also, let's connect on LinkedIn if you have any ideas. If you want to talk workflows, whatever, you feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. And there is also a video that we were asked to share in previous sessions, like on best practices and also how the media carbon calculator can integrate in other systems and workflows. All right, I stop sharing, and I hope this was interesting, and we still have time for Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florian. I'm just going to stop the recording now so we can open the floor to Q&A.